Well, Family ID, thanks for joining us today. With us, I have Eric Browning, the founder of Santa Stone, and just a great example of when you're submitted and surrendered to God, what He can do when He puts an idea or a thought in your head. And He might not give you the total picture as to where it's going, but when you're faithful and you move forward in faith, we can see what happens. So Eric is a beautiful story of that. Eric, thanks for joining us today. I am excited about where this conversation is going to lead and where God's going to take us.
Man, I appreciate you having me. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. So at Family ID, we're all about family. That's the foundation of who we are. Tell me about your family. Who's in it? What are they like?
Yeah. So we are a family of five. I've got two boys and a little girl, of course, my wife. Cannon is our oldest. He's 12. He would be our creative coyote. And that means he loves to dream big. He loves creativity. I remember I could probably tell you 20 different times that he just came up to me and said, "Dad, let's do this today." And I remember one, he was like, "Dad, let's build a robot." I was like, "Oh, okay. But let's build a robot out of metal and bigger than our house, and she'd shoot lasers." And I was like, "Wow, come on, man, that's awesome." And I had no idea how to do that. Oh man, so he's super creative like that.
Did you
But
do
he's
it?
like
Did you
art.
build the robot?
Oh, mm. So the closest thing we got to anything big was building a couple of forts.
Okay. All right.
So
Okay. Yeah.
nothing robotic about it, but they sure did have a lot of fun. So, but he likes to run in packs, so that's why I call him a coyote. He likes to run in packs. He's family focused. He's a little bit territorial. He's great at getting groups together and saying, "Let's do this. Let's do this. It's gonna be awesome." And he gets them going, and he's off to something else. He's getting another group together. So, anyways, but that's Cannon. He's our oldest. Dawson is our our second son. He's 8, and I call him a conscientious competitor. So he's also a servant, but he he does everything that he does well. He works hard. He goes for it. Goes above and beyond. He's kind of our natural athlete, I'd say. But just love him. Not quite as outgoing as our oldest, but just really unique and strong in his own way.
Mhm.
And then Emery is our youngest. She just turned 6 well, it was about a week and a half ago now. And I call her our compassionate cuddle bug. Man, girls are totally different than boys. I don't know if you know that, but it's something special. So she loves being close. You can just tell that she understands when something's maybe not quite right with someone,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
maybe they're suffering or not in a good mood, and she just loves to come up and give them a hug or just tell them that she loves them. Lauren's my wife. We've been married over 17 years.
Congrats.
I call her the regulator. She's realistic, you know. She's very realistic. She likes to get the business done, put the ducks in a row,
Mhm.
and specifically reminds us boys that we are mortal and not to hurt ourselves with
Hey,
our intentions.
don't tell anybody. This is a secret between you and me. But I'm also married to a regulator, and so I understand. I understand everything that you're saying right there, and thankful for it. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah,
Thankful for it, but I get it. Yep.
yeah, it's a good healthy balance. And then there's me. I'd say I'm the captain of the ship. Largely, I'm a dreamer. I think really really big. Kind of like my oldest son in many ways. Try to lead from compassion. So try to assume the responsibilities I'm supposed to have as a man, and try to be an authority figure without being a tyrant. And but ultimately, I'm an adventurer. That's why I like being outdoors and doing things that we do in the wilderness. So
I love it. You talk about adventure, and we're diving way in at the very beginning here, but I always talk about how, as men, we have an adventure bucket and a duty bucket, right? And when our duty bucket gets really full and our adventure bucket gets really empty, we feel empty. And I think it's at the heart of men to have that adventure bucket outweigh your duty bucket, and that's what makes us feel alive. Just something about when you brought that up made me think of it.
Yeah, this last week we were getting ready to go camping, and both my boys were just super stoked about going. We were just like, man, when is the last time we actually got out and got away and just had some adventure? And it really hadn't been that long, but it had been long enough. We were ready to do it. So
Hmm. Okay, so if you had to put the five Brownings um, into a bucket, or if you had to say, "Hey, we are all about this," in a few words or a sentence, what is the Browning family all about? What's your
yeah,
purpose?
sure. So I'd say the Brownings are about letting God's word guide our purpose, um,
Hmm.
anchor our faith, and lead our legacy. And if you don't mind, I can take it just a step further. So we take God's
Please.
word as absolute truth. All of it means we put ourselves under every bit of it, not just some of it.
Hmm.
We think our purpose includes working hard at whatever we do, protecting truth and people, and always seeking God's will. We understand our life will include challenges and suffering, but we resolve to kind of in those times to anchor ourselves deeper into Christ rather than to run away or freak out. Then we just realize that all people leave a legacy, and
Hmm.
some are worth following, many are not worth following. So we
Hmm.
want our legacy to
Hmm.
be born kind of out of Paul's words, which were to follow me as I also follow Christ.
Hmm.
And then just kind of as a sidebar, there just when you talk to us kind of individually and collectively, I'd say we value loyalty, obviously, but we really value shared enjoyment and activities, high levels of communication, which sometimes I'm not very good at that, and then just having a gracious, kind of thankful attitude for what we have.
So, how in the world? Okay, so those are like that is clear purpose and clear understanding of what we value, core values. And talking about clear communication, this is a joke and a side note, but I've got a little dad's flip chart calendar every day. You know, you flip it over and it has some funny dad saying or something, and
Hmm.
it said at some point your boys will communicate in grunts only. But that's what a dad's for. He's there to interpret what that teenager boy is grunting about and to pass it on to the rest of the family. Oh, this is what he means by that grunt, right? Clear communication. Sometimes
Yeah,
dad's the interpreter. But
right.
okay, so you have a beautiful purpose, clear core values on what you are standing on and how did you get there? How did you get there?
Well, to be quite honest, a lot of this started a long time ago. Um, just with some of my interactions with other folks, and I'm sure we'll mention it again in a little while, but the Navigators really had a profound influence in my life, starting about 22 years ago. But I will say, as a plug, shameless plug, your Family ID, I went through this several years ago, and I credit my friend Rush Schwetman for he was in our Sunday school class and he said, "Man, you've got to go through this thing that Greg's put together is wonderful." So we went through that over a period of probably I don't know 4 to 6 weeks, and then had the pleasure of having Greg and his whole family come and talk to our Sunday school class of about 30 people. So that was a really special time just to try to do what you guys have put together, just to find a passion and a purpose for your family. So, to kind of expound on that, I've done a fair share of reading over the years. People like John Eldridge and Joe Ehrman, Tim Keller, Watchman Nee, Paul David Tripp. Um, but then just getting in the Bible, it's clear that there are roles that men and women should play. Men was created first, not made better necessarily, but he was given truth, he was given commands, and he was asked to protect the woman and to pass on those truths. We see that we were to train our kids up in the truth. The Bible didn't necessarily ask us to parent our
Mhm.
kids to be star athletes, to get high paying jobs, to find success in the world's eyes. we're really meant to train them up to follow the Lord and to seek Him first in everything. That's our role. And then the Bible's also clear that we're to love each other well. You know, 1 Corinthians 13 comes to mind. You hear it in every single um, wedding you go to. But that can look like sacrifice. So on my end, just as a husband, being able to sacrifice appropriately for the sake of the family, for my wife. Ephesians
Mhm.
5 comes to mind on that. We can love well through correcting one another, and doing it in a loving way. 2 Timothy 3:16 comes to mind. But ultimately, we want to be unified in our love, and I think Philippians 1 talks to that. But ultimately, we need to put God first in literally everything we do. We need to love Him with all our heart, soul, mind, strength. And when we do that, then we can better see the world through the Lord's eyes, and then interact with the world around us, um, through His will, basically for us.
Eric, I think there's enough there that if we push stop on this podcast, on this interview, I think that there is enough there, right there in those verses and the way that you are leading your family and the way that you and your wife are leading your children that we could chew just on those pieces for a long time. As a husband and a father, it's a thank you for reminding me of how I am to lead and how I am to love my wife and to love my kids. Doctor, a
Mm.
couple of videos ago, we had Dr. Tim Elmore, who is an author and a speaker. And one of the pieces of advice, and you are saying this in the same thing in a different way, is one of the pieces of advice that he gave is he said he always tries to prepare the child for the path, not prepare the path for the child. And that's what I heard you say when you're
Mm.
talking about, hey, we aren't supposed to parent our kids to have high paying jobs or be star athletes, but truth is a person. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And so we are to prepare our kids to know the truth, and that truth is Jesus. And that's what I hear you saying. And it's awesome, man. It's awesome. And it's a good reminder to me as a dad and a
Ah,
husband.
oh, appreciate it.
Okay, besides doing all of that unbelievable stuff that is intimidating to just a normal person, to say, God, I hope I'm doing that for my family. On top of all of that, you specifically lay your life down for fathers and sons to create that special relationship between a father and a son. And
Yeah.
tell me about that.
Whew. Well, I mean, Sand Stone is the name of the ministry. I'm just so thankful to be a part of it. I know it sounds weird having created it, but the Lord brought this ministry into my life for a purpose and a reason. I think influence wise,
Mm,
I grew up going to Kennecott camps. I was there for 4 years as a camper, and then I did a couple of years as a counselor. And I just remember loving being outdoors, doing they had a 2 or 3 day wild edition of Kennecott where we did some camping and hiking, that sort of thing. So that gave me a greater appreciation for the outdoors and adventure. Specifically, remember a guy named Lance Leonards at Campus Crusade for Christ. I was going to Oklahoma State, and we went through a Robert Lewis study on authentic manhood. And at the end of it,
mm,
he took us through a manhood ceremony, and we have a specific day where we could
mhm,
say, "Hey, we became men today." And so that was a profound influence on me. And then around 1999, I I started becoming involved with the Navigators. It largely exists for men to meet with men, kind of in a one-on-one relationship. And a gentleman named Guy Madison and I sat down right across from one another at a New York bagel every week, and he poured his life into me and encouraged me and taught me real simple, basic ways to read my Bible, to pray, and to pass that stuff on to someone else. So I credit those three things in helping thrust forward this whole idea of sand to stone. And so I remember telling a guy in 1999, "Hey, I feel like I need to do a father son thing." And he said, "Oh, okay, cool. Well, you're not married. You don't have kids, you don't have boys. Why don't we just see how this kind of plays out? And so we just dug in and met together again for years. And he helped me out tremendously in just my walk with the Lord, just by spending that quality time with me. So fast forward, 2013, we were trying to consolidate our ministry, meeting. I was meeting with some men from the Navigators, pouring my life into them, but I decided, we need to really kind of centralize the ministry. And so we decided just to get really involved with the Sunday school class. And I just told the Sunday school class, here are a couple areas I feel like I could serve. You guys tell me what you want. And one of them was this whole idea of a father-son camp out. And they said, let's do that.
All right.
And I was like, okay, let's do that. So that's what we did, And so like today, Sand and Stone exists to provide an environment where fathers can connect with their sons in both community and in adventure, and we also provide the opportunity for
Mhm.
fathers to be able to communicate clearly what godly manhood is and how it should be expressed. And then we will provide dads resources in kind of how to walk with their sons, walk alongside them along that pathway to manhood. And we encourage dads to be pace setters, not that they need, and I think this kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier. It can be intimidating. I mean, fatherhood, parenthood is intimidating. Marriage is intimidating. It's the reality is because we can't do it alone. Well, but
Mhm.
we
Mhm.
can be pace setters and yet just be a step ahead. Just just be one step ahead. You always have something to pass on. So that's what I tell anybody really. If they're wanting to lead their family, at least get one step ahead and then just keep pressing forward. So
I love that. That is so several things of what you mentioned in there. Pace setters is a great terminology, and I love that imagery that it provides that you just explained about being one step ahead. And it is intimidating because as a man, I didn't have a perfect father growing up, right? None of us did. Nobody had a perfect father growing up, and I'm not a perfect father now. And so there are some areas that I feel good or strong about, and there are some areas that maybe I'm a little apprehensive or I feel weak about. And you know this, diving into men's studies, and same here is as a man, we will run towards things that we feel strong and completely abandon or run away any area in life that we feel weak. That's our natural fleshly tendency. And so I love that you are putting together this father son and the community piece because God uniquely created me different than you and different than my other buddies. And so by putting together in a community, it might allow somebody else to pick up a spot where I'm off or a little weak, and I might be able to pick up some of that weight where they're strong, and help my son or see what's going on there and how it all works together.
yeah, completely agree. Yeah, I just think what came to mind was the Inklings, C.S. Lewis and Tolkien and a couple other guys. And when they lost one of the guys from their group to death, I remember C.S. Lewis. He made this remark. He said, "Well, I thought, well, I mean, if there is a silver lining, I'm going to have more time with, Tolkien and whoever." But what they found was that, what he realized was like, no, 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 actually, not having this gentleman in our group kind of almost we lose something because we had another brain kind of looking in and being able to like point out things that we don't see about ourselves and contribute to the group. So actually, I got less of Tolkien because I didn't have someone else, speaking into that group setting. So, anyways, it just came to mind. You were saying that.
Yeah, well, and the second thing that came to mind when you were talking is in 1999, before you were married or before you had kids, you felt like God was leading you towards some father son thing. And so timing, I think, is really important there too. That sometimes God could put a vision in our lives or in our hearts, but the timing might be different. Just because God says go do this, it doesn't mean go do this now, right? I mean, if I'm
Right.
hearing right, it was maybe 14 years between the time that you originally brought it up in conversation and the time that you had the opportunity to take the first step.
Yeah, and that is how it's always been, Eric. Um, it's always been that way. It's be faithful to wait and to listen, and then when God says go, be faithful to go.
Right.
And I just was not in any hurry. I knew that God was doing some work in me. I needed a lot of help, you know. So, um, but anyways, yeah, God, He's faithful, and I just was ready to respond when He said to do it. So.
I love it. What did that feel like? What was it like taking that first step? All right, I've got this thought in my brain or in my heart, in my spirit. It's been rolling around for a decade and a half. And then I'm throwing out some ideas, and somebody says, let's do that one. And it pings, right? It hits, and you're like, really? Okay. What did it
Yeah,
feel like taking that first step?
well, I mean, to be honest, we just got a group of about 20 or 25 guys, and we just went out and camped.
Okay.
It was just an experience of being at Robbers Cave out near Wilburton, right at the kind of the shoreline of Lake Carlton, and
Mm-hmm.
just being out there. There was something just about the adventure of it, of just getting outside. There was nothing at that moment that we were like, man, we've got to change the world, and do it through our sons today. Um, but what quickly came from that was this, we went on another trip, and it was super fun. And what was hilarious was everybody had their own Coleman stoves and tables, and tents that were halfway ripped. I mean, it was hilarious. um, but people getting flooded out of their tents in the middle of the night. I mean, it's crazy. But what we realized is, after that second trip or so, it's like, okay, so that's all fun and games, and it's great to have community, but we need structure and we need a
Mm-hmm.
foundation. And so that's when the feelings started to kind of come forth and kind of emerge. And so we started just kind of looking at, like, at manhood. So we know manhood's being attacked.
Mm-hmm.
It's being marginalized. The family unit's being redefined and integrated. And the societal messaging is very secular. It's constant, never stops. It's overtly counter to God's original intention. So, we realized if we didn't take steps to teach our boys what manhood was and to fortify it through things like rite of passage, then they'd left being confused by, like, the world's definition, or they would find out the hard way, in a very painful way, what it means to be a man, or they'd altogether just fall in line with society
Mm-hmm.
and their expectations. So realize you just couldn't be silent. We couldn't be confused ourselves, and we couldn't be lackadaisical or passive. We couldn't allow our youth pastor or a pastor to do all the work for us. And so we needed to have some sort of, like I said, a foundation to take our kids through, from start to finish on this pathway to manhood.
So, so you're saying when you took your first step, you didn't have all the answers figured out, and you didn't have to come up with some magnificent plan on how you're going to take it from A to Z or how you're going to run it for the next 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, not initially, but but God put it on our heart, to do that later on. But yeah, I mean, it didn't have to be something, like you said, grand
Okay.
and over the top. I would just say that probably more than anything, this ministry grew extremely
Mm-hmm.
organically and at just the right timing and in just the right way. Not because of anything that I did or anybody did, just from let it do its thing and letting God kind of work through it, honestly.
What's the most rewarding part of walking through this for 7 or 8 years now, watching it evolve and grow from a bunch of dads going on a camping trip to now? And I appreciate your terminology there of saying, "Hey, we're going to fortify manhood by these events and these teachings because manhood is there and you're teaching it and it's foundationally at the home, but by a rites of passage event, it creates that stake in their mind, right? That milestone in their life that they
Correct.
can refer back to, and that's that in itself is not manhood, but it reinforces the learnings they've done. Of all of that and what it's developed into, what are probably the most rewarding parts of it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, within our events themselves, just seeing men in community working together to make a trip function at a high
Mm-hmm.
level is that's a great representation, in my opinion, of uh, the body of Christ. Like First Corinthians 12, all the parts working together. I love that, and I just think that's so valuable for. I think it's valuable for the
Mm-hmm.
dads, but I think it's valuable for the boys that go on this. They see men working together to accomplish something, fun and exciting, and ultimately, you know, deeply meaningful. Um, Second thing that comes to mind is just watching the father speak
Mm-hmm.
blessings over and make commitments to their son through these ceremonies. That is a distinctive feature of our time together, and we won't spend the whole time doing that, but that is a very set apart time. We talk about, we plan for, and we uh,
Mm-hmm.
memorialize, and so I guess lack of a better word, but we look forward to it. But being able to see the dads make those commitments to speak blessings, to be in front of a group and courageous enough as to do that with their son is awesome. And then another one comes to mind, just seeing the boys move from children to like young men through rites of passage. There's two things that happen. You have a whole group of boys out here that are watching this, and you can just tell they're like, wow, I'm going to get to do that. And then there's all these conversations afterwards of, Dad, when do I get to
Mm-hmm.
do that? When do I get this? When do I go through that? I mean, my son last weekend, he was super disappointed because I didn't go through his ceremony that he's due for this fall because we're going to do it on at a later event. But I enjoy seeing that aspect, but I really enjoy seeing the boys as they move from stage to stage, starting to embrace those new roles. A big shift happens between around 12,
Mm-hmm.
12, 13 within our within Saint Stone, and so there's an expectation change, huge. You're moving from being told what to do and why to do it and given knowledge and all that sort of thing. And now it's like, okay, all these things you've been taken, told, now you're going to take, and we want you to start embracing those things and living them out. And we know you're not going to be perfect at it, but the expectation now is that you need to take this
Mm-hmm.
the next step because you're going to be a man at some point, and we can't just leave you where you are right now. You have all you need to move to the next step, and just be able to see them go, okay, and then immediately giving them new roles within camp. You can see them; they're taking it on. They're like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is what I do. And then seeing the kids again, the younger ones being like, oh, that's really cool. They couldn't do this, now they can do this, and I'm looking forward to that. Right? I mean, there's a process to it. And there's an excitement that kind of builds around it. So that's really really cool.
That it sounds cool. It sounds neat. It sounds like you make a big deal out of things that are a big deal. That if you
Right?
don't make a big deal out of it, it could just move through and nobody notices and nobody points it out. And for many people, I think for a lot of men in society, that's probably what happened. And so it's just not a big deal, and they don't make a big deal with their kids. So, um, okay, as we begin to land this plane and bring this to an end here, if two questions, what would you say to somebody who maybe feels like God is stirring something in their heart to begin a ministry or to begin just an event or an activity like this? And then the second part is, what would you say to a family? So, first one specifically to a person who wants to do something, and then secondly to a family who maybe is just starting this living on purpose with a mission and understanding what God's purpose is for their family and all of that. How would you respond to those two groups of people?
Yeah, man, those a couple of big questions. So first, I'd say, forget about being the perfect
Mm,
father. for the job. You're just not going to be perfect. It's not going to happen. But you can do your part by being a pace setter. Um, I understand that means taking that first step, right? But you need to make a commitment to put on the armor of God, so to speak. I mean, when I read that passage in Ephesians 6, I'm just like, well, that is literally just walking in the Spirit, but it's a great picture of me like putting on God for the day, to help me fend off the deceptions that they're going to come my way, the non-truths that are going to try to deceive me. I would say, secondly, to start with an end in mind. So that by the time your son leaves your house, like, what would you love for them
Mhm.
to know? What would you hope that they would embrace? So they need an understanding in my house. I feel like you need a super solid
Mhm.
understanding of truth. And I think about people that study money, that looking for counterfeit money. Like, what do they do? Do they bring them in different kind of counterfeits every single day so they can look at the counterfeits? I say they probably don't. I don't know. I've never seen them do it, but I would say that they probably give them a $1 bill or $100 bill, whatever, and they say you study that $100 bill, and so you know every single line on it, every single point on it, or whatever. And what will happen is if they do that, if they know what that looks like, and then as soon as there's a counterfeit, they're
Mhm.
going to
Mhm.
immediately recognize it. So in our house, understanding truth is super important because then it allows us to identify counterfeits or half truths, or full lies. So that's high on my list, and I would encourage people to look at that. I think bearing fruit is important, fruit of the Spirit from Galatians 5. I want my son to know what that looks like, and I don't know that, again, they're not going to be perfect at
Mhm.
it, but I want them to bear fruit. And if we see little bits of that as they're getting older, then man, they're on the right track. And I say that, and I'll just say, like, I don't expect myself to be a perfect fruit bearer all the time. I mean, I would hope I would be, but I know I'm not because I'm still a sinner. So I'm not gonna expect that out of my kids, but I am gonna expect that I'm teaching and reinforcing that, and then I'm pointing out and walking alongside them when they fall and saying, oh yeah, I do that sometimes too. But here's how we can be better. And then finally, I'll just say, on this, that I'd want my kids or my boys to be
Mhm.
an encouragement to believers, and I'd also want them to learn how to interact with unbelievers alike. So they can love both and not create division on either. If that makes sense. Well, I want them to have lives it's like a gospel persuasion. If that makes sense. Um, and then I would say, just from on this whole stages of marking the way, just decide on how you want to do that and what that should look like from boyhood to adolescence and ultimately to manhood. I would say, be
Mhm.
careful of the cultural lies. So, and avoid defining manhood or worth and value around things like wealth or athleticism, intellect, social status, or
Right.
what the world says is success. And then finally, don't do this alone. Go find a small group of like-minded men who can affirm and check rein, encourage, and then participate alongside you in that journey with your kids. I mean, we all need counselors, but for our plans to succeed. So, all right. So that was the first part,
Okay, that's first.
and
That's
then
first, right? Okay, don't do it alone. Begin with the end in mind and seek truth and understand truth so that you can compare cultural counterfeit to God's truth, right? Okay, got it. All right,
that's
second part.
correct.
What would you say to a
All
family
right.
who's just kind of fallen into this for the first time, don't even know where to begin? Maybe they're just a couple steps behind you. What advice would you give?
Yeah, yeah. So I look at our family and they're unique individuals. So for me, I'd be exploring and observing each person's kind of natural talents and tendencies. And I'd like to know how they best flourish. For Lauren, she thrives under like order. She thrives under just stellar communication and in tempered risk situations. So she's also from a family that loved to travel and go on vacations. I personally only went on a handful of vacations in my entire childhood. Not because my parents are bad parents, it's just the nature of my dad's job and that sort of thing. So we're just kind of, and if you look at us too, like my wife is from an urban setting, and not that I'm not from an urban setting, my parents are much more kind of country, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, but so we're unique in that respect. So, so like for simplicity's sake, we know Lauren is going to thrive well in a planned, non-extreme activity, um, with a getaway. So we're gonna make sure that going on vacations that are well planned and not extreme are on our
Mhm.
list to do, right? So, but when you do that with like each individual, you can kind of start to piece together a family identity that helps you flourish based on how you're designed. That's why I mentioned the kids earlier and just kind of how we look at them. I mean, they're super unique. And so we want to make sure we help them flourish and to live out their purpose well. Um, so like Camden thrives on social and community activities. So we need to make space for community in our house, even though it may not be what we would naturally
Mhm.
choose in order to help him flourish. We want to make sure that's a part of our household. So having groups of people over is a big deal. Dawson thrives on competition, and doing just general hard work. So man, I'm going to help him thrive by getting involved in
Mhm.
sports. I'm going to encourage him to help around the house, and also to help people that are in need. So if there's a service project or that sort of thing, I'm going to ask him, get him involved because I know that that's going to help him thrive. Now, I say all this, it doesn't mean that there's an exclusion automatically from everybody else just because of that. Um, I say that we all need exposure to all those things. We need to do all those things well, but we want to make sure that we're also playing to individuals'
Mhm.
uniqueness. Emery brings joy, through being compassionate. So, we want to play to that as well. Um, so, what I would say is once you've kind of observed and being like, okay, these are how this is how the family kind of best get, gets joy and satisfaction in life, and what can we do to kind of draw it all together? And so, my role, kind of as a captain of the ship, so to speak, is to make sure everything's doing their part well, but in a way that brings satisfaction to them and then to the family as a whole. And I want to make sure that they are fulfilled and that God is fulfilling them based on how He created them to be. So I don't know if that best expressed what you were
I,
hoping, but
I
that's
think
that's what
it's
I would do.
I think it's fantastic. I mean, and what I would say to families that are listening that have never gone through Family ID, have never sat down in a formal process, what you just explained, Eric, is incredibly helpful because every family can sit down together um, around the dinner table or an evening and just think or observe the different members of the family. And I enjoy your creative taglines about each family member that kind of, it personifies who they are and it makes it fun. And those aren't labels; those are descriptions.
Right.
And I think everybody, because I can think about my wife and how I would, okay, yeah, she fits this and that, and so then you can create an environment at home that person would get a win at home based on the unique way that God has created them. And I think that that's a simple project. That's a simple experience that families can just sit down and do. And it's not overwhelming or daunting at all. Just to say, hey, how do you best thrive? Oh, I know how you best thrive because I live with you. I see you do these things and these things. So let's make sure that we incorporate some of those things into our lifestyle. So I think that is great advice and great wisdom that you're sharing with us. Thank you.
Mm, yeah, you bet.
Yeah. Okay. So, um, what is if somebody was interested in Sandstone? What's the best way that they could connect with you or Sandstone and your curriculum and events?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the easiest way is the website. It's the number two, stone.us. And they can go there, look at upcoming events. They can browse resources for dads and families, and they can sign up that way as well. There's also, I think, really good information about just ceremonies in general. Maybe we hold some of those ceremonies close in the specifics,
Mm.
but you can get an idea of kind of our heart behind the ceremony and the process behind it as well. So that website's really good. You can also, if you scroll down far enough, you can sign up for newsletters and emails from me. And you can also follow us on Instagram. I don't go much beyond that, but that is nice because I can get out and get some media out there, and you kind of get a little glimpse as to what we're doing on some of our trips. And yeah, so I think those are probably the best ways. I love there are some. I believe you have access to things like the growth planner, which I could express more or explain more, but it's a really good way for you to sit down with your son or family member and just kind of plan out your year together. There's a section on. I've got 100 and some odd books based on
Okay.
age of your kiddo that you can look at. And then I've got links to things like Family ID, to the navigators, to access.org and True North, just for additional resources as a family seeking out kind of what they can do to lead and live well.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. You heard it, Eric Browning with Sand to Stone. Eric, thank you for sharing wisdom and blessing to myself, encouraging me as an individual and a dad and a husband. And thanks for sharing with our families. And I pray blessing and favor over Sand to Stone, and that He may bless your efforts and in His timing bring you to the next step.
That's right. Derek, I appreciate the time. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to express my heart and for being interested in what we're doing.
Absolutely, man. We're on your team. We are on your team. Okay. Have a great one. We'll talk to you soon.
Yes, sir.